Okay, today's video I'm going to cover replacing the radiator in my 2005 Dodge Grand Caravan. This will cover 2005 through 2007 Caravan, Grand Caravan, and Town & Country with the 3.3 and 3.8 liter engine. The 4-liter engine may be the same, I'm just not familiar with it, so I can't say for sure. Also, the 2001 through 2004 models are basically the same thing. It is a different radiator though, so don't buy a 2005 radiator for your 2002. While I have this one visible, to drain your existing cooling system, they do put a valve down there with a little tiny spigot hole on there. They buried it really good. It's really hard to access, and it also drains really slow. What I'm going to recommend and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the lower radiator hose and drain it out quickly that way. Or you'll take all necessary precautions since you're going to be working in the front of the vehicle where the airbag sensors are. You're going to want to disconnect the battery. Also, park in a safe location, level ground, put on your parking brake, and I would recommend chocking your wheels. We will not be removing the wheels for this procedure, but we will be jacking the car up. Okay, now let's talk about coolant. Number one, whatever you drain out of there, if you're not reusing it and pouring it back into the cooling system, collect it and take it to a recycling center. Do not pour it down the drain or into your yard, whatever. It's very bad for the environment. So, and plus it's illegal. So collect it up. You may or may not need distilled water on hand. Don't use tap water. If you're going to flush your system. If you're just going to replace the radiator and then just refill with new fluid, buy the 50-50 mix, or if you're just reusing what you have, if what you have is still good. If you're refilling and I have to do a flush, you're going to need just to flush it with distilled water. I want to talk about what coolant you should choose. I just looked in the manual. It says Mopar. If you go to Walmart anymore, their selection is terrible. As far as concentrated, they have nothing. Everything's 50-50 mixes in there, which in my particular instance I can't use, so I opted for the SuperTech. This should be the gold color coolant, which is an OAT organic acid technology. Then there's also HOAT, which is hybrid organic technology, whatever. Use the proper coolant. Now, OAT or HOAT, really, I'm quite sure you can use both in this vehicle. One thing you do not want to pour into here is the Prestone Green. In fact, I don't even know if there's a car made today that can take Prestone Green. You put that in there and typically you wind up with bad head gaskets, or your radiator starts leaking down at the joints. Some people may get on here and argue with me about that, but in any case, never ever ever use the wrong coolant. The one that I prefer is the G05 Xerox, I think is the brand, but they don't have that at Walmart. So, but this should be, they're both gold coolants, and this should be the same. But otherwise, look in your manual, the Mopar coolant, and go for that. Alright, so what happened with my radiator is I developed a little crack in the plastic up here, very small, but when it's hot, a jet of water was shooting out. So thought I could buy some time. I put some bars leak in there to try to stop it. Also, under my intake manifold during the winter, that seal started to leak. So in that case, I bought the expensive stuff, this K-seal. Now, I've used Bars Leak and different products over the years, and my experiences has been that it never does anything. So my advice is, if you're ever tempted to try any of those sealants, just don't do it. Don't do it. It just creates headaches for you. This would be a quick and easy job for me, but now it's probably going to be an all-day affair getting it flushed out and refilled. Okay, you're going to have to go under the front and passenger side and remove this plastic cover here. And there's 1, 2, 3 Christmas tree clips holding into place, and that will give you access to the lower radiator. And a 4th one up in behind the bumper. Okay, you're going to remove this 10mm bolt here. You'll either have a Christmas tree pin or one of these center pin type clips here. Remove that, and then you got 3 Phillips head screws, and then the exact same thing on the other side. So it's 2 bolts, 2 pins, 6 Phillips heads. And we'll just lift it up towards the back of the car, shimmy it around, pull it forward, and then you will put it in the shade, because otherwise it's going to get burning hot if it sits in the sun. And now we have 4 bolts on this center brace that we have to remove. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you'll want to take a screwdriver and undo these 2 clips that hold the cable for your hood release. Now, some people, not most, will just lift this off and let it dangle off the side of the car. Personally, I prefer to use a moving blanket and just put it up in there. Just gotta be careful that you don't knock it loose. Next step is to remove the cooling fans. You may have 1 integral unit. Most times it's 2 separate units, but you have to spray some penetrating oil on those 2 bolts. And then you have to undo the wiring harnesses, which, let's see if I can get a good shot of that for you. Now, the wiring harnesses have a lock on them, and you have to pull that lock up. I don't know if I can do it and hold the camera at the same time. They're a pain in the butt, but you got to get that one up before you'll be able to push down the button in order to slide the harness off. The other fan is the exact same way, except for this clip is pointing down. Okay, 10mm bolts are removed, wire harness is disconnected, and the fan lifts right out and gets put into the shade so it doesn't get too hot. Now, I already removed the lower hose to drain the system, and whenever I remove the hoses, I always do it from the radiator side, because this is plastic. Other end is into painted steel. Sometimes you break that loose and then you're going to have leak problems because it's leaking between the paint, where the paint was, etc. And I would recommend that you go on Amazon, buy yourself a set of these hose clamp pliers. These things, I mean, sometimes, especially the little ones, will make your job last twice as long, just because they just keep popping out of the pair of pliers, whereas these are made to actually grip them, and then they ratchet so that they don't open up again. So once they're clamped on there, you're free to shimmy it down the pipe. Okay, pulled that pipe loose. And you're going to take a screwdriver, and you're going to get your overflow hose. Just came right off. Overflow hose off of there. Now, your transmission cooler and your condenser for your air conditioner is mounted to the front forward-facing part of your radiator, and it's hooked on with these little clips here. And usually you just tug back and forth and they will pop loose. Otherwise, you can just pull the bumper back, reach in, and squeeze the clip a little bit to separate the two. A little harder on that side, and if you want a lot of access, you can remove your headlights, and that will open you wide open on the sides there. Okay, once the top of the radiator and the condenser are separated, the condenser actually has to be lifted out of the radiator. I'll show you those clips. Okay, so that is what your condenser is sitting in, and it's also clipped there, but that clip should release for you. So I got to lift it up and out of here, and typically it involves just lifting the radiator up and moving it towards the engine, and that gives you enough clearance to lift. And now, before you go to lift it out, you got two, what I will now refer to as snag plates. Why do I call them snag plates? Because they snag on everything in there as you're trying to get the radiator out. And there's little tooth clip that hooks there and there that you got to kind of reach down, push under, and pull forward. You will be reusing those. And there's one on the other side that was blessed with, I think it has blessed with 3 clips. So once that's out of the way, we should be able to get this here with a little finagling. Now, if your lower grommets came off with the radiator, as they typically do, you're going to remove these and move them onto the new radiator, and make sure you get the correct side on each side. Okay, I moved my bushings onto the new, and those bushings will seat there and there. Okay, and now I'm going to wrestle it into place. Seated in there. Next step will be put to replace our snag plates into their proper position on both sides. Okay, in order to hook your condenser into the hooks on the lower part of the radiator, what I found is best is pushing down on the radiator while you're lifting up on the condenser from down below. So I was actually more like that, and then trying to lift up evenly so it's not on an angle, but lift up, get that bottom hook in, and then after that happens, you can lift up this other end and get this end clipped, and then you can, or before you get that end clipped, lift up this end, get that hook, that's the easy side, and then push it into the clips on both sides. Anyway, but one thing you will also notice, there's an air dam that goes across here, I guess to stop air from escaping between the two. And there's holes in the top here for you to clip it into. There's no holes on here. I've heard other people of drilling their own holes, which is very risky to say the least. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the old one and see if it matches up, and I'll just swap them. Okay, as you can see, the swap went well. Used the new bolts on the new radiator with the old top. Just okay, when you install your fans, there's a metal clip on the bottom of the radiator that fits into. There's a plastic clip on the side that this fits into, and then there's a nut that goes on top. Now, I don't remember if there's much play in here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop them both in, and then I'll put the bolts, not nuts, but bolts into place up top there. Okay, for mine, the clips on the bottom for the fans, I'm going to have to reuse the old ones because these aftermarket ones, let's see if we can get a good shot of it, they sit way too low. And so really the bottom clip of the fan is like just about falling out of the metal clip. So I'm going to swap them. Alright, the fans are in place. Had to cut off the end of this hose in order to get it to fit for the overflow. And the next step is to put our cross member back into place. And these grommets here fit onto these pins. Drop right down into there. And then I'll bolt that back together with the four bolts, 2 on each end. But first, before I bolt this down, I'm going to reattach my upper radiator hose. Okay, in the end, the condenser, it's actually condenser slash transmission cooler. It just won't clip. This aftermarket radiator clips will not grab onto the part of the condenser, so I threw zip ties on each end just to secure it, be sure. Now we'll put our cover back into place. Okay, everything's back together again. I'm all purged, refilled and purged. Some helpful hints from owning 4 grand Caravans and having done this before. When refilling it, especially if you have the rear heater on your model, they can be a bear to purge the air out of. So my driveway is on a bit of a slope, so I'll start out with filling it pointed uphill, get as much into it as I can, and then I'll start the engine, let it run for a bit until we're a little more than halfway warmed up. Then I shut it off, let it cool down, take off the cap, refill again, cap it, heat it up, let it run until it's full temperature, and turn on the heat in the front and the back and check to see if I'm getting any heat out of them. Usually I do not, or I get very little heat out of them. Shut it off again, let it cool down, refill again, heat it up, or run it till it's operating temperature again. Then I will turn the van around so it's pointing downhill on my driveway. At that point, the heaters start to blow hot air. I'll let it run for a bit, rev the engine a few times, turn it around again so it's pointing uphill, rev the engine a few times, let it run a bit, shut it off, let it cool all the way down, check my level again, top it off. And then from that point on, I check the reservoir tank. I don't bother over here anymore. Check the reservoir tank depending on if the engine's cool or hot. If it's at its appropriate level, there's markings on the side of the reservoir tank for you to go by. And the system will automatically top off. That's an expansion tank. So when it gets hot, that fills up with some coolant, and then as it cools down, it sucks it back through that hose back. Okay, now, and if you flushed out your system like I did with distilled water, did several flushes, and now you're finally going to be putting in the coolant, you want to use concentrated because there's going to be water left in the system that you can't get out. And here I will provide the capacity for depending on which model you have, and you're going to want to add the concentrated to the cooling system first according to how much you need to make it 50%. So if it's if it was a 4-gallon system, you'd have to get 2 gallons of concentrated in there, and it may not take the full amount initially. So you're going to have to go through cycles of heating and cooling until you can get all that concentrate in, and then do heating and cooling again. But at that point, you're going to start topping it off with distilled water. So the distilled water you're adding in the end, mixed with the distilled water that's already stuck in the system from the flush, will add up to 50% for you. And that's how I do it. So if you find this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm now going to move on to the next problem, because anytime you fix anything on a Grand Caravan, something else immediately shows up 2 days later. And you will see that in my next video. Fun. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.